One of the areas of halacha which sometimes gets forgotten about is the kedushat Chol HaMoed. That a person has specific halachot, we have specific halachot to help ensure that the intermediary days between the beginning and the end of Pesach and Sukkot, the days of Chol HaMoed, also are observed with extra kedusha. They're not just regular Yemei Chol. One halach, and these halachot, by the way, really make for a very big difference, and the more a person is aware of them, the more you can factor them into major decisions we're about to describe right now. What is the halacha if a person is in the middle of doing work on their house? By work I mean contracting work, building, construction, and he comes into a Yom Tov. It's obviously, of course, I shouldn't say obvious, but one would understand that we're not going to allow the workers to continue working on the house on Yom Tov, or Shabbat for that matter. But what about Chol HaMoed? Chovadia writes very, very clearly, Kol melachot she'asu la'asotam b'Chol HaMoed, any melacha which you're not allowed to do on Chol HaMoed, which includes construction by yourself even, asu la'asotam afilu al yedei goyim. A non-Jew may not perform for you either. You may not perform it, and a non-Jew may not do it for you either. She'asu chachamim din Chol HaMoed kedin Shabbat v'Yom Tov li'inyan zeh. Meaning that the same way you can't have a non-Jew do melacha for you on Shabbat, you can't have a non-Jew do melacha for you on Yom Tov, so too the same applies on Chol HaMoed. That's l'chadchila. B'diavad, if a person did have someone, a non-Jew do melacha for you, then are you allowed to have benefit from it? Unlike on Shabbat, then the answer here is yes. You are allowed to have benefit from it, b'diavad. Mikol makom, he writes, makom mitzvah, if it would be a mitzvah that they're doing construction for, in that case, mutar, you can have a non-Jew do it. But the point is that even if the non-Jew is building for you, and there's going to be a loss that you're going to suffer by not having the non-Jew work for you on Chol HaMoed, you're obligated to stop the non-Jew from working. You're obligated to stop the non-Jew from working for you on Chol HaMoed. You have to stop the construction, even if it means that you're going to suffer a loss. Which is interesting because usually on Chol HaMoed we have a halacha that if it's davar ha'aved, which we'll describe in a moment, if there's an opportunity now to save myself from financial loss, then I am allowed to do that type of a transaction or that type of a malacha. But here, to have the non-Jew continue contract work for me during Chol HaMoed, even if they're going to walk off the job, a person is not allowed to have them do that malacha for you. That's the simple halacha according to most poskim. The reality is that contractors, as the name implies, they work with what's called kablanut. They don't get paid per diem, they don't get paid per day, they get paid for the job. And therefore, really, when they choose to work on Chol HaMoed, they're working for themselves. They work because they want to finish the job. Even for the foreman, a lot of times, he wants to hold on to his crew. So he wants to keep them busy for the entire duration of the job. Because of this, Moshe Feinstein writes in the Igrot Moshe that technically, a non-Jew contractor could even do work for you contracting on Shabbat. Why? Because he's not doing it for you, he's doing it for himself. However, Moshe writes, Yesh lachmir bazeh. A person should be machmir and not allow his non-Jewish contractor to work for him on Shabbat. Why? He writes because there's such rampant chilul Hashem and chilul Shabbat that we encounter, that whatever we could do to sort of mend the breach. And Marit Ayin, most people know that it's not really Marit Ayin, just Reb Levi is pointing out, what about Marit Ayin? It's not really Marit Ayin because everybody knows contractors work based on the job, b'kablanut. So everybody knows I didn't hire him for the day. Everyone knows I hired him for the job, and he's choosing to work today because the contractors want to get finished with the job. So it's not really such a problem, Marit Ayin. That's what I'm saying. Meikar Adin, it's really be okay. It's just that Yesh Lachmir, you should prevent your non-Jewish workers from working for you and contracting on Shabbat in particular. Why? Because it's contributing towards what appears to be Chilul Shabbat, and that's not something that we should be engaged in. So again, L'chal Ma'aseh, technically, according to the Igrot Moshe, it's permitted to have the non-Jewish contractors work for you on Shabbat because they're working for them, they're not working for you. You pay them for the job. Whether they finish it in 5 weeks or 6 weeks, they want to push themselves, that's on them. But they're getting paid for the job. If they want to work on Shabbat, technically, they are allowed to do so. Nonetheless, yesh la'achmir. Moshe writes, you should not allow them to do so, because it contributes towards this whole sort of atmosphere of Chilul Shabbat. The question.
Shabbat and Chol Hamoed the same.
So the question is, what about Chol HaMoed? What about Chol HaMoed? Once you have the understanding of the Grot Moshe, which is that technically the non-Jewish contractor is working for himself, he's not working for me when he chooses to work on Chol HaMoed. Do I also have to stop him in that case? Since Mikar Adin, we said it's really permitted for him to do it, he's really working for himself. So this is an open question. This is a question which it's not clear what the Grot Moshe would say in this case. Nonetheless, I could just tell you from speaking to contemporary poskim mufakim in Los Angeles, in Miami, different poskim that answer many sheilot. They say it's very rare that we give a heter for a person to continue private contracting work over Chol HaMoed. The circumstances would have to be rather extreme for us to dispense that allowance. The typical halacha, psak halacha that everybody should follow is that contracting work over Chol HaMoed has to come to a stop. If a person knows about this halacha before he starts the job, he could already work it into his contract with the builder that for this entire week you're not going to be doing work. And that way, otherwise a person's only going to realize at the last minute, and he might have to pay for that additional, those days, even though there's no labor being done. Okay, so that's an important halacha for people to know. Another thing we touched on was the idea of davar ha'aved. You're allowed to do melacha or business on Chol HaMoed to protect yourself from a loss. Profit is a different story, but to protect yourself from a loss, you're allowed to do melacha. Let's say, for example, a person has or in their property or in their business or whatever the case might be. Of course, he's allowed to do the work even himself, because otherwise he's going to suffer tremendous damage. So to prevent loss, he's allowed to do melacha. Question that comes up very often is regards to shopping. Is shopping permitted on Chol HaMoed if it's not for the purposes of the Yom Tov or for the Chol HaMoed itself? Any food purchases which are necessary for Yom Tov or Chol HaMoed are permitted. But if it's not necessary for Chol HaMoed, not necessary for Yom Tov, what is the halacha in that case? Clothing, when it comes to washing clothing, really we're very machmir, more so than the 3 weeks. What? Right, so I'm saying if it's necessary for Chol HaMoed or for Yom Tov, then a person's allowed. But l'chadchila, a person should not. A person, it's only, it's for after Yom Tov, it's not really for Chol HaMoed. There's no real allowance for that. It's a purchase which is not for Chol HaMoed should not be taking place on Chol HaMoed. So it should have been done before Yom Tov. It should have been done before Yom Tov.
But we said we're allowed to go with the kids for entertaining, for the gaming.
But that's not really. That is the activity. That is the activity. To make purchases is different. I think maybe what you're speaking about, which might be even more relevant, are big sales. If it is in fact an unusual sale and the price is going to go much higher after Chol HaMoed, after Yom Tov, then Yalkut Yosef is matir. If the case of a dress. There's a dress which is on major sale right now. If I buy it now, it's a certain low price. After Yom Tov, it's really going to be significantly higher. Then Yalkut Yosef is matir. But
you have some stores that Beshita do the sales like that.
Non-Jewish or Jewish?
I've heard of stores that Beshita during the 3 weeks in Chol HaMoed.
These are Jewish stores.
Bedavka do a sale that is like 50-60% off, which disappears after in order so that people should buy. Meaning it's Beshita. So
I'm not familiar. I'm not familiar with Bedavka doing that. On Chol HaMoed, it's the poskim say is that it's not l'chadchila. A person is not supposed to be going shopping on Chol HaMoed for purchases which are after Yom Tov or necessary for after Chol HaMoed. It's just if it's going to be a very big sale, that's mutar.
Or let's say they're busy before Yom Tov. So
okay, that's similar. It's similar to what we're talking about. This next type of a case. What if you have a couple or a family? They live what's called out of town. They live away from large Jewish metropolitan centers, away from the New York area, from Lakewood, things like this. They're out of town. On Yom Tov, they come in to visit family, into the larger population centers. And there are things available here which are not available in a little bit more remote communities, or communities that are not quite as large. So the poskim do talk about that case. It says, this is from the Sefer, the Halachot of Chol HaMoed, from Art Scroll, Moshe Francis, and Rav Shmuel Zucker Shalitam. He writes that by shopping at these times when the families are in the larger population centers, you're avoiding the substantial expense and difficulty of the extra return trip. They're not here usually to be able to make these purchases, and where they are, the merchandise or the food, whatever, is not available. So in order to get this again, they have to make a return trip. That is already in the category of davar ha'aved. Even though the purchases they're making at this time are not necessary for Chol HaMoed per se or Yom Tov, nonetheless, in order for them to have to come back to get these items, that would already put them in the category of davar ha'aved. One more case that falls in very similar to this idea is, let's say you mentioned going shopping. So one destination, which is very popular, are malls. Because malls don't have just shopping, there's also activities and different entertainment there. Certainly mall, what's it called, the American Dream, right? There's a very, very popular spot for Chol HaMoed because of the activities that are there. What if a person is there, a family is there, and they're there for the activities, but there's also a store that's selling an item that they anyway needed? They're not typically near that mall. They don't live within 15, 20 minutes, 25 minutes of this particular mall or this shopping center. They're there now for a permitted Chol HaMoed activity, and for them to have to come back later just for the item which they could easily get right here while they're in the mall anyway, would that put them in the category of davar ha'aved? And here again, the poskim that are brought down in the footnotes in the book of Chol HaMoed, they say the same thing is true also, that if, in order for you to come back, it would involve significant amount of travel, not talking hours, but let's say 35, 45 minutes each way plus gas and tolls, that already is in the category of davar ha'aved. And although you're not allowed to go to this mall to get such an item on Yom Tov, but if you're there anyway, and to also get that while you're there would be mutar, that would be in the category of davar ha'aved.
Are you allowed to do things that are like, let's say, like go to the DMV, right? Like during the week, everyone's so busy, it's insane. So Chol HaMoed, you have, let's say, a spare 2-3 hours, but is it a zilzul of Chol HaMoed to do something like go to the DMV?
Yeah, if possible, that things like that should not be done during Chol HaMoed. The kedusha of Chol HaMoed is really reserved mainly lo nitna Torah liyamim tovim leYisrael ela she'asku bahem b'Torah u'mitzvot. The Yerushalmi writes that the primary focus of Yom Tov, be it on Yom Tov or Chol HaMoed, is that we should utilize the opportunity not just for housework or for chores, but for spending time with the family, and in particular, Limud Torah on Chol HaMoed and Yom Tovim. רבי יוחנן בן קשה אומר, רצה הקדוש ברוך הוא זכור לזכות ותיקח שבא לכם טוב מצוות שמע דרך מצוות סיפור עדות תורה וידיר.